Welcome to the video everyone, and today we're going to be talking about the witch trials in England, and we're going to be more specifically looking at Henry VIII's legislation throughout his reign. And at first I had thought that the legislation didn't exist because I was looking on the legislation.gov website and nothing comes up. I'll show you what I mean. So the years that they applied were, I think, 1541, I think it was. If you write in witchcraft, by the way, you'll notice that nothing comes up. So I had to do it by the years that it was applied. So we had the Witchcraft Act, we're told. Let's have a look. Yeah, 4162, and then 63, and then, so we'll have a look at 62 as well. And you'll notice that actually they don't come up on the legislation. I know that they were repealed, but there's plenty of repealed laws which still come up on the legislation website. So it didn't make sense to me. So I was thinking, bloody hell, they weren't written up. And then there's something else which made it seem dodgy, and that was that it was Thomas Cromwell. Well, if you look into the name Cromwell, it means crooked or bent spring or river, stream. Well, when I think of, they call it winding stream. Well, when I think of crooked or bent, I'm thinking working against the moral values of everyone else. That's what I think of. So Cromwell to me means like a poisoning of the well. And there's a saying, poisoning of the well. Informal fallacy. It's an argument, unfavourable information about a person A is presented by another. May I remind you that you have been in jail, or something like that. So they just sort of falsify these people's, target them. Poisoning of the well can take the form of an explicit or implied argument and is considered by some philosophers an informal fallacy. Poisoned well arguments are sometimes used with preemptive invocations of the association's fallacy. In this pattern, an unfavourable attribute is ascribed to any future opponents. So, they might say, oh, well, you've been accused of sexually assaulting someone or something like that. And then that turns the whole society and mob against that person, in this day and age at least. So that's what I think when Cromwell pops up, because Cromwell has popped up loads of times in the past. And it's interesting. Anyway, that wasn't the case, and we have the laws here. And I had to go searching the whole internet for this. It was so difficult to find any information with regards to these laws. This is a Pennsylvania state copy of the laws, and you will see through all these tables that there's nothing at all written about the Witchcraft Act. I went through all these tables at first, searching. I know I live a sad life, but yeah, I went through all of these and there was nothing. Then I started to find the legislation really interesting. It gave an idea of where his head was at, a kind of method behind his madness type thing, and he clearly hated Catholics. So we're going to have a look at some of these laws first of all. And this is where you can see a whole load of laws being written up in here concerning strangers, all sorts of things. I don't think there was anything of great relevance on that page. But there is the Acts of Parliament on 57. Right. Henry VIII. So this is where the statutes start. And we're going to be looking through these, first of all, because some of them made me laugh. Some of them reminded me of today, but at a far more aggressive punishment. You'll soon see. So here is visors. It just made me think of those face masks that everyone's been wearing. So you're not allowed to wear them. You wouldn't have been able to have COVID during the 1500s. Against disguised persons and wearing of visors. You wouldn't be able to have Muslims either in his time. This one's interesting. This next one. Oh, and that's in year 1511 to 12. Now, this one's very interesting because this is about physicians and surgeons. There we go. Oh, by the way, concerning the idea of Old English, it might be worth us trying to use Old English so that we can circumvent our censorship that we're facing today. I wonder how easily algorithms learn and understand Old English. I mean, it worked for the Anglo-Saxons, right? So why not us? I mean, it's really easy to understand, I think. And you can definitely see the German in a whole of the Old English. Or at least I can. So yeah, this is the physicians and surgeons, and it's interesting because he started legislation and qualifying specific physicians and surgeons, probably because he could start making money from, you know, certifying them and all of that kind of stuff. You'll notice later on there's stuff about poisoning, people who are poisoning others, with very harsh consequences for that. Now, if he's legislating physicians, then he's legislating medicines as well. And so that would mean that he would be making money from that. And I think one of the reasons why he hated the Catholics as well is because he had to send money back to Rome, to the See of Rome, and that must have been something that really irritated him. In fact, I think one of the things which he hated was, and it comes up over and over and over again, is the horses. The best great horses of England were going over to Scotland, and I would imagine that at the ports in Scotland they were sending off these great horses to other countries, and that was probably for the benefit of Rome, because the Roman Empire has not actually fallen yet again. Or it did, but it re-established itself in 1066, here in the UK at least. But he was working for Rome, really. All these monarchs are. And they were sending all their best horses over to Scotland, and you can tell that he was getting infuriated by it. And, you know, that was probably to the profits of Rome rather than himself. So he was always writing legislation about the horses. Regarding Wales and the Celts, because they were also a problem to him, they were they were spinning their own wool and creating textiles, and he started legislating that and coming in that. So I think what was going on, he was legislating all these businesses and incomes so that he could tax them, and he just didn't want to give any of that money to the See of Rome. That's it. Physician laws. Well, after this physician and surgeons legislation came about, they had multiple cases of the bubonic plague in the 1500s and the 1600s. So that tells me a lot about medicine. This penalty is boiling people to death for poisonings. What a mad man. Whereby 2 persons were killed. The crime of one, Richard Roos, in putting poison into a vessel in the Bishop of Rochester's kitchen, whereby 2 persons were killed. The said Richard Roos shall be boiled to death. Future murders by poison declared high treason and punishable by the like of boiling to death. So I'm not sure if these were scare tactics to get people to feel fearful of, prescribing their own medicines, which would be called poisons, like we did see with COVID, or whether there was a genuine poison of 2 people and that is the consequence. But you'll see later that doesn't add up. There's this one, the Act Concerning Egyptians. This is really interesting because I didn't realise that was happening. So these Egyptians were arriving in England in 1530. Now, according to the narrative, they were from Little Egypt, which was basically where the Romany gypsies were coming into the UK, because they were leaving the Byzantine Empire and heading over here, and there was more and more of them arriving here. Frauds of certain outlandish people called Egyptians. Such Egyptians shall be punished by impressment of the loss of goods. I can't read that word. Derived of the benefit of statute. Do medicate. Ling something. Proclamation for departure of all such Egyptians. Goods shall be restored to the parties robbed. So this was going on. All of these people were arriving, and this is just before laws came back where later on they were trying to allow the Jews to be resettled in the UK. So this is where all those Jewish people were returning to coming to the UK, and I did this in my other video about the old laws, and they still exist, but they shouldn't be here and they have to go, kind of thing. Now, next one is, let's have a look. I stopped writing down the titles because there are so many interesting laws which tell a tale about the history of our society. So 1531 to 32. I wonder what I was looking at. Oh yeah. The act that men in cities, boroughs and towns which be clearly worth, whatever that means, in good, shall pass in trial of murders. So, you know how we have like the grooming gangs going on, and those perpetrators are automated victim class. You know, we can't offend them because then we become the bad guys. This is what this law is about, where people from good towns and boroughs, according to Henry VIII, are going to be cleared of murder. So, very interesting. We're seeing a repeat of what's going on, really. You know, when you think about that poison law, I can't help but think about the naturopaths who were saying, well, rather than doing the injections for COVID, why don't you take this? And, you know, they were losing their licenses and everything. So we do live in a very repetitive society each time. Now then, yeah, you're good murderers, you're good rapists, victim rapists. I'm not sure what this one was. An act concerning restraint of payment. Oh yeah, every year he's got to send a payment over to the See of Rome. And that must have been very frustrating, because he probably just wanted to get cash in, you know. You actually see his laws for his in this legislative book. You see his own laws written for his great wardrobe, the king's great wardrobe, and his servants and all of that kind of thing. And then he has to send money in payment to the See of Rome. That must have been so frustrating for him. An act, for the vice of buggery, punishment for buggery, guilty of felony without clergy. So here's the act for punishment of heresy. So basically, when he got rid of the papacy and Rome, he still followed the Roman Catholic rituals and everything. He kind of basically kept it together. And it was in 1557 when the Geneva Bible was written. And when you look at the Geneva Bible, you see all his footmarks around the edges. Well, that's basically what the Geneva Bible looks like. It's got the Bible scripture, and then it's got basically their opinions on the side. And he legislates that anyone doing that is a heretic or something. I can't remember, and there's quite a few laws about this. And they are very, very harsh. So there's repealed acts and recited acts as well. In most humble wise, lamentable unto your highness, your most humble, loving and obedient subjects, the commons of this your realm, that where the clergy of the same in the 2nd year of King Henry, one of your most noble, can't read that, upon their suggestion did impetrate and obtain by auction of Parliament holden in the said 2nd year. Well, I can't read it all. But this is about the punishment of those who are reading the Bible in a different way and questioning it and whatnot. I think that the UK, England and Scotland were deeply religious places. Obviously you had the Egyptians arriving, so they would have been bringing their own philosophies and ideas of religion. So that would have been changing the movement around religion in the UK at that time. So, I mean, if you want to change the idea of religion, then you need to make sure that you're removing those people who are, bringing about this different concept of religion or different interpretation. But the thing is, as people have experiences and watch on and observe the behaviours of others, they are going to question your interpretation of the Bible. And that's what heresy is. It's your interpretation of the Bible. Then you've got these other people with different religions arriving, and then you're going to question the Bible altogether. So, you're in that situation all the time. You can't get rid of it. So this is 1534. Here we go. The Marchers. This is my family, my Celtic family were from the Marchers. And the Marches were basically from Chester all the way down. But they were dykes built, apparently, according to the narrative, by the Anglo-Saxons. We're going to look into that, into walls and dykes, in another video. They were built by the Anglo-Saxons, or created by the Anglo-Saxons, we are told. And the Marchers and the Berwick in Scotland come up later on, just before the laws are written for witchcraft. Now, it's saying here that there are murders and felonies done or committed within any lordship marcher in Wales shall be inquired of at the sessions holden within the sphere ground next adjournings. My family, up until the 1950s, hold a significant amount of land along there, but also along the North Wales coast, and they were still selling it in 1950s, where they were selling it for housing estates. And my family is, on that side is pure Welsh, and then the other side it's all Anglo-Saxon. So it's interesting that in Wales now, later on, they're saying that they're going to start charging these people with murder. But in these good towns and villages and boroughs, any murders which take place will be disregarded. So this was a land grab by Henry, because later on he starts applying English laws to Wales, but then he does give Wales their own parliament, which again is a very repetitive thing of where we're at. But I found this so interesting because that's where my family are from, and also North Wales, and they were shepherds there and landowners. So they don't own the land anymore, and the money was spent, probably with inflation and whatnot. So I'm not a rich woman. An act for punishment of Welshmen attempting any assaults or affrays upon any inhabitants of Hereford, Gloucester and Shropshire. And an act for purgation of convicts in Wales. So he was really targeting Wales at that point, getting rid of the Celts. If you look into the Celts were rich people who had emigrated over to Wales just to become smallholders, basically. They farmed their own food and became self-sufficient, which is what a lot of people like to do. And so my own family in that situation, this was what the laws were back in the 1800s in Wales. So they could build, if you could build a chimney within 24 hours, then you could build the rest of the house over a period of time, and that was fine. You could just build your own houses in Wales, and you could, take land around it. So that's how my family became landowners in Wales, and it's still going on in the 1800s or the 1700s. And I would imagine that the monarchs, and probably the Catholic Church too, like Rome, the See of Rome, did not like the fact that they were becoming self-sufficient and they were using these laws to obtain land. And so I suspect they needed to attempt to find ways to, incriminate these Celts, and the Scots probably came in with that. And so they needed to incriminate them so that they could take the land, I guess. Not to mention legislate them so that they could tax them as well later on. And this is about the convicts in Wales. Murder, robbery. But bear in mind again how you can compare that to the abandoning of any sort of trial against those who murder from good towns and cities. It's interesting, don't you think? So they do target specific people, and it does target Catholics really badly later. I mean, it's horrific. Robbers of the sea, pirates and robbers of the sea. Well, they would have been, the pirates probably would have been sort of Devon way, which was the Celts, North Wales and South Wales, which was the Celts, and Ireland, which was probably the Celts, and Scotland, which would have been the Picts, but more so the Scots, because the Picts were closer to England, and that's where they had their land, whereas the Scots were at the top right by the sea. So they, the Celts and the Scots would have been pretty much targets at that time, because they would have had, like I say, you see all these laws about horses. So they were obviously taking, this is in Scotland, they were obviously taking best horses to send over to abroad and sell. And he hated that. And that could have been on behalf of the the Roman Catholic Church, because they were Catholic predominantly at that time. Although on my walk and talks I have come across buildings built in J774, which they are claimed to have been built in 1774. So I do question our timeline as well. So we are told that the Celts and the Scots were pagans. When the Anglo-Saxons came over, they were pagans. And then they all converted to Christianity around about 400 AD. So I'm questioning whether we're in the year that we're told that we are in, and all sorts of things. There's loads of them. I just found them so interesting. Some of them really related to my own family's past, so I just looked into them a little bit. An act whereby the King's Majesty shall have power to nominate persons of his clergy and lay fee for making ecclesiastical laws. So this was where he was starting to remove himself from the papacy. 1535 to 36, an act for laws and justice to be ministered in Wales in like form as it is in this realm. So that means that all the laws in England will now apply to Wales. And that was probably to obtain the land in Wales from the Welsh. And that was probably what the hope and plan was in Scotland too. An act whereby all religious houses of monks, canons and nuns which may not dispend manors land above the clear yearly value of that amount are given to the King's Highness, his heirs and successors forever. Now I think this is where they started to take away the land. I think that could have been a bit later as well, I don't know, but there's a video where I was going around the city of Chester, and I went there because I'd come across this man who told a very interesting story about the bubonic plague, which happened in Chester. Everyone ran away, and then the Duke of Westminster bought up all of this, all of the houses and all the buildings there, and previously it had been the monasteries who owned Chester. So it's just interesting, that aspect. And I talk about my thoughts surrounding the fact that we could be in Satan's season, like Revelation 21 in that video. And it's really pretty, Chester is. There's a lot of momentum around God in there, but you know, it's nevertheless very, very pretty. I mean, I like that sort of thing, but not everyone does. I didn't when I was an atheist. An act concerning the assurance of lordship and manor of Collie Weston to the Queen's grace for term of her life. So this was Anne Boleyn, I believe, and this was a manor going over to her family, being handed over to her family for the rest of her life, which was just a few more years. And then it got taken away from them. Enrique, an act that felons abjuring for petty treason, murder or felony shall not be admitted to the benefit of their clergy. I'm not sure if that's what I was looking at. We'll have a look. An act for the continuing of statutes for beggars and vagabonds. Ah, yeah, here we go. And I can't read that. Against conveyance of horse and mares out of this realm against Welshmen. Is that? Welshen. Making a phrase in the countries of, oh yeah, Hereford, Gloucester and Salop, which would maybe have been Shropshire kind of way, so all the Welshmen, and the vice of buggery. So he's saying that the Welsh were taking the horses, and sodomy. You see, they were selling, and they've got these pirates who are selling all these assets, which horses would have been at that time, you know. Then he was probably finding reasons to, you know, go after them. And the Welsh, if you don't know, have this label of being sheep shaggers. And so maybe he was saying that there was a bit of bestiality going on, so that he could apply these laws to ensure that the pirates in the Welsh, the Celts, didn't sort of, you know, make money without providing him with some taxes of sorts. I suppose the Celts were pretty clever, as well as well off. And that probably annoyed him and them, and something's gone wrong since, maybe, or maybe not. I think they are pretty bright. An act extinguishing the authority, maybe, of the Bishop of Rome. So this is where he's trying to get rid of all the papal power in the UK, in England at least, and Wales. And that will be because he doesn't want to pay them. Because if he wants to stay in power, true power, and keep his great wardrobe, then, you know, he's going to have to get rid of the papacy. An act for punishment of pirates and robbers of the sea. This was happening in Scotland, and it was happening in... And so Berwick was a port. I think it was a port but back then. So he was obviously chasing the pirates and the robbers, and he needed some kind of religious law to extinguish our ancestors, probably, who were trading on the sea. So they're given the name of being pirates and robbers, and it makes me think about the Bolshevik Revolution, where they turned the paupers against those who were rich so that they could then take full control. And this is what I kind of think with the Scots and the Celts, because I'm kind of thinking that they were turning the English maybe against them. I don't know, I'll have to look into it, but it just has that sort of Bolshevik Revolution ring to it, and that's where my mind goes, but I'd have to research that a bit better to know for sure. This one is an act for the release of such as have obtained pretended licenses and dispensations from the See of Rome. So his claim... they can't practice here. Covetous and ambitious minds. They want to change England back to Catholic, and he's not having it, basically. I'm not sure of the consequences of that, but this is a very, very long law compared to the one which is a witchcraft. Witchcraft does exist, but it's like that. It's a felony, the witchcraft one. We'll get there in a minute. This one, an act concerning the assurance of the manor hide of Southwark onto the King Highness and his heirs. So he was taking, this is from Reverend, they're taking all the land and the buildings from the monasteries and giving it to his family. And that would have been happening in the city of Chester when I went to there as well. They were taking the man. I talk about it on that video, so you should go and see that video. But basically, they were shooed out of their cities. The king took their land and then he passed it on to his families. An act concerning an exchanging of London between the King's Highnesses and the King's Chief Secretary. I think this is the one I was looking at. I'm guessing it is. It's Cromwell. Yeah, Thomas Cromwell. So this is where, because I wasn't sure, because at the beginning I was talking about how Cromwell means crooked brook or crooked stream, and I felt that it had a meaning of poisoning the well, and so I wanted to check that Thomas Cromwell is actually a real person, and he's written in there. Now that doesn't stop the fact that they may have been using these signs and symbols as Freemasons back in the 1500s, because I think some people do trace Freemasonry back to 1500s, even in the Anglo-Saxon times some people do. But Cromwell is actually written in the legislation, so there's that scepticism gone, vanished, evaporated. Right, this one an act that such as were religious persons may purchase. So I think this is where he's starting to build his own new Church of England. And he's, asking those to come over to his side. The Act for dissolution of the abbey. So all of them were going over to him now. They weren't owned by the Roman Catholic Church anymore. All that land, all those buildings, they came over to him. Which is interesting. I find it interesting actually looking at the laws and seeing them myself, going to the legislation and seeing what happened rather than Wikipedia. I know I have used Wikipedia and I don't necessarily object to it, but yeah. Look at this. This made me laugh. An act abolishing diversity in opinions. Does that ring a bell? Respecting the Christian religion. And I think in favour of vows of chastity. Any person who by word, writing, and shall teach or hold any opinions contrary to the first article, declared a heretic, and punishable by death, by burning, with forfeit of his lands and goods. So you could not be, you had to, imagine how hard that is. If you are a religious person and you are a Catholic and you've been a Catholic all your life, and then suddenly over the next 5 years, Henry VIII is saying, no, you can't be a Catholic, you've got to switch your ideas to my ideas, or otherwise you're going to be burnt, you're going to forfeit your lands and goods to me. I mean, that is so harsh. People don't change their view. Well, I suppose they do with the help of a TV set these days, but, it's... Yeah, I suppose people can be talked into it. Concerning strangers. The king, our most dread sovereign lord, calling unto his blessed remembrance the infinite number of strangers and aliens of foreign countries and nations, which daily do increase and multiply within his grace's realm, and minions in excessive numbers, to the great detriment, hindrance, loss, and impoverishment of his grace's natural to true lays and subjects for this his realm, and to the great decay of the same, remembering also the manifold good acts and statutes which have been heretofore made as well by his most noble progenitors as by his own most royal majesty, for reformation of the same in divers. So yeah, he doesn't really do much, and then they're still coming in. They've not stopped. And his apprentices and servants of aliens. The aliens should bear like charges as the natives. So obviously some people were getting away with murder or rapes, because rape becomes a law as well. I'm not sure if it was a law prior, but it becomes a law and is spoken of here. Evasion of the restraints of the said statutes under patents of deionization shall obey the recited statutes, obeying and observing the law. So obviously these people, and I've talked about it in other videos, where aliens and foreigners are coming to the country and then they are stealing and from the people, the natives, and then they are not having the laws, they're not applying the laws to these people as they are for the natives. And that's exactly what's happening now. You know, you have these grooming gangs, these Muslim grooming gangs, and the police just turn a blind eye, and the media will refuse to talk about it. So these are happening over and over again, which is why I think it's important to look at the laws to see how the laws are going to advance in our future. Does that make sense? It does to me. Concerning Christ's religion. So this is all about him. He's obsessed. So while the aliens and the Egyptians and the foreigners are coming and, you know, causing turmoil with his people and subjects and the natives, and this could have been distraction, deliberate distraction, because he could have sent them home earlier, but he didn't. So his focus is on the religion, on Catholicism, and taking over land, taking over, taking money basically, and power. That's his mindset. Whereas the people, the natives, were getting concerned more, I would imagine, about the foreigners who are stealing from them and committing crimes against them, and the punishments aren't equal. We're seeing that today, aren't we? Where the King's Royal Majesty of his blissed and gracious disposition, like as his Highness is our sovereignly Lord and supreme head of the Church of England, so his Grace taketh the care and solicitude thereof most diligently, foreseeing and providing all that he can to be quiet, union, concord. Right, do you know what, it's weird, I find it really easy to read Old English, and today's English I struggle. Here we go. Resumption at Calais, Berwick and Wales, where divers of the king's subject by their sinister and subtle information and means have heretofore had the obtained of the king's majesty, as well as by his tre patentis is by bill, and warrants assigned by his graces, hand divers. So Calais was still Brittany at that time. So it's the Marches again in Wales, and it's the town of Berwick or Berwick. And this would have been all such grants declared void and revision. So he was bankrupting these towns because they were the pirates. That's what I'm concluding from this. My ancestors were pirates. In real terms, I expect that just means they were tax evaders or tax avoiders. I suspect strongly that that's what they were, rather than pirates. Ahoy there, pirates. Right, concerning physicians again. So these laws surrounding the physicians and the surgeons. That was in Oxford that he set up the whole physicians and surgeons laws. So they were dispensing of drugs. Well, not like we have today under the Rockefeller. They would have been like herbal drugs at that time. But yeah, there's loads of baking of horse bread as well. This is going on long. I'm coming to the end soon. It's right at the end, the whole Witchcraft Act. So this is, yeah, these are pardons. The King's General Pardon. He writes a lot of them. And I feel that the pardon, you know how you get these politicians who will say, yeah, I'm going to lock her up. And it subdues the audience. And they'll be like, yeah, he's going to lock her up. And then he'll say, oh no, we're great mates. And then he'll come back again and he'll say, oh, I'm going to lock someone else up. Or something like that. I don't know. I don't follow these people anymore. But this is what he seems to be doing. He seems to be writing a lot of general pardons. And I think that is to subdue the population when he senses that there's a rising up. That's what I believe is going on there. Trumping it. He's trumping it. Let's call it that. You know what I mean. An act concerning counterfeit letters of privy tokens to receive money and goods in other men's names. I bet that was Wales. I bet the Celts were doing that. Or I wonder if it was the aliens and the Egyptians. An act concerning crossbows and handguns. So this is when the first handguns law came in, and that was in 1541. That's just for those who are interested in gun laws. I thought I'd let you know that was there. The first law around it. The bill. Here we go. The bill, conjurance and witchcrafts and sorcery and enchantments. Now it's interesting because there's really not massive penalty in comparison to the poisons one, you know. So there is punishment, of course. So it's a felony. Shall have power and authority to detain felons, shall have and suffer such pains of death, loss and fortunes of their land to be taken from them. And again, I feel that this is targeted at the Celts and the Scots and Berwick, because the way I'm seeing it is that they were the pirates that he wrote laws about earlier on. Then he applied the laws of England to Wales, but he obviously didn't apply those laws to Scotland, who had their own sort of monarch at that point, so he couldn't sort of overpower that. So the Scots were taking the best horses, the best assets from England. The Celts had their trades in linen and cloth and all that kind of stuff, wool. So they were self-sufficient, which I don't think he liked. And perhaps the foreigners and the Egyptians were brought over so that they felt anger towards the richer class of the Scots and the Celts. Again, we see that today with the whole "you're white privilege, you don't deserve that, we should have your money because of, you know, colonialism and all of that." And so were the Celts. The Celts were overpowered, and he became, you know, king of them, and the laws applied to them. So presumably the laws didn't apply until the 1500s. The laws of England didn't apply to Wales. But yeah, I think this was about taking their land. This wasn't really necessarily about witchcraft, but witchcraft became this. You think about today, and you've got in the kind of 60s, 70s, was it? And you've had the satanic panic. And then you had the IRA stuff, so that there was this sort of fierce hatred of the Catholics in the 80s and 90s. I remember that. And then you had the sort of fierce, then you had the Muslims with the 9/11 and the 7/7. And then you had all sorts of things. So this is why I still, I am still dubious about the surname Cromwell meaning crooked spring, and these Cromwells keep popping up in our history, and they are the poison well. They are the sign and symbol to say, yeah, this is all fake. This is fake reason behind it. Right, okay, so yeah, it is there. It's a very small law. It's very short compared to the other ones, especially the ones around pirates and whatnot. So I just think that it was an excuse. And it was, he probably did the same technique that the media does today. He focused the mob's minds on certain people and groups who they should hate. And at the moment it's self-loathing, because I suppose they're about to kill themselves. An act for murder and malicious bloodshed in the court. Oh, so murder and malicious bloodshed in the court. So, that would have been like in the manors and the estates and his own court. There's obviously bloodshed going on back then. Lovely. But they were good places, so probably ignored it. I didn't read that law, but I just thought the title was interesting. Now this is where my family live as well. They do now, but they also did back then. And this is when he probably started. The Marches is a little bit different to Flintshire and Denbighshire, but this is where I'm from. An act concerning lordships insulated from the county of Denbigh to the county of Flintshire. So who's taken over Wales at that point? And the Celts were losing everything, probably, sadly. An act for advancement of true religion and for abolishment of the country. So that was all about the Catholics. And in Scotland, they were practicing Catholics. So this would have also applied possibly to the foreigners arriving, the Egyptians and what have you. But he'd written laws saying that they had to follow his laws and his statutes. Whether they were, I don't know. I suppose they would have had to at that point, because they would have lost their jobs, and no one wants to lose their jobs. We know that. They'll do anything to keep their jobs. An act for a person's being no Cohen surgeons may minister medicine outwards. So this is about the surgeons and physicians laws, but he started, I think he also started the post service. Which reminds me, on my Substack you can find an article I wrote about how the freedom of reach goes both ways. You know, if they're trying to contact us to apply these laws, they'll have to find the way to do that. And if we start ignoring the post and emails, phone calls, they can't reach us with their laws. And also, I wrote an article about scaring off the police, UK police, from Twitter. I've let them know that they're committing a genocide. So they started to usher themselves away from Twitter after I wrote that to them. Anyway, back to Henry VIII. He started a fair few industries, but and you know, the city of London, so that would have included Oxford, I guess, where it was all starting to take shape. But the bubonic plague did follow soon after. Last couple. It is a long video, sorry. An act for the due payment of the fees and wages of knights and burgesses of the Parliament in Wales. So he's taken over Wales by that point. Wales is gotten. It's succumbed. And 1052, dissolution of colleges, and that's because they would have been Catholic, I suspect. And I know that I look at Jews and Catholics quite a bit on my channel and question them. I don't hate either. I've got Jewish family married into my Anglo-Saxon, and I absolutely adore my cousins, and they are so much fun. They're not Jews anymore, you know. I don't think they're of any religion anymore. And I've got adopted family who are mixed race and all sorts. My son, with regards to Catholic schools, he went to he's Catholic school educated. His dad, a great big Welshman himself. You think of Tom Jones or Rod Gilbert and their deep, growly Welsh accents. Put them together and you still wouldn't reach his accent. And I said to him, our son's going to have to go to Catholic school because it turned out that way. I didn't want that. His dad didn't want it. Oh, he was devastated. He was, no father wants their son in a Catholic school. What I could do was say sorry, you know. I'm so sorry. Sorry? Is that all you can say? Sorry? I'm sorry very much. You know? So neither of us wanted that, but it's turned out great. And I suppose it's having these Jewish and Catholic things happening in my life which piques my curiosity. I'm fascinated. Something new happens in my life and I want to learn about it. It's like COVID, you know. I'm like, I've never really thought about you know, health and sickness and all those sorts of things. I've never thought about vaccines or anything, and something new like that comes into my life, I just question it. I'm like, I want to learn more about this. It's not like a hatred necessarily. It can turn into that with the vaccines and things, but it's you know, it's not a hatred, it's a curiosity. So anyway, that is the Statutes of the Realm with Henry VIII. I'm sorry it's such a long video. I hope it was of interest. I'll link this down because I couldn't find it. It's funny that it's called Babel. I couldn't find it anywhere. And I was determined to find the actual legislation and law. I didn't really go into it that much, but there wasn't that much. I was disappointed with the size of the paragraph that the Witchcraft Act was given. You know, you had way worse, really, for the poison. And I suspect that the poison one, where they were boiled to death, was more about... He wanted to take over power of medicine because he could then start raising taxes and starting charging people to learn how to do it and all of that. So this was a money adventure, money scheme. Let's have a look for his wardrobe. It might come up, and then we'll leave it there. His great wardrobe. I thought I'd put it in, but I hadn't. Here we go. The sums herein great wardrobe. An act the assignment of money for the king's great wardrobe. And there we have his beautiful wardrobe. Well, I'll tell you this, I have 4 great wardrobes and 2 of them are 3-door wardrobes, so in your face, Henry. Right, please like, subscribe if you want more of these videos about legislation and all that kind of stuff. If you find it interesting, I do, so there must be someone else out there who does. There must be. I can't be the only geek, I won't accept that. So if you're like me and as boring as me, then you should subscribe and you should like and you should leave a comment. Bye.